Are you wondering how you can retire by 40 years old? Maybe sooner, maybe even just by your 40s? Let's talk about that in this episode right now. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti financial advisor. This show is for those of you that work so hard for your money and you're now ready for your money. Start working harder for you today. You want that freedom and cash flow now. You want to become work optional where you work because you want to, not because you have to. Why? Because you want to be free, right? You want to live rich, but you want to live a rich life because as you're blessed financially, you have a greater capacity to bless the lives of those around you. And that's what this show is all about, is how do you have that freedom and prosperity today rather than waiting 30 or 40 years from now to maybe never get that freedom. Thank you so much for being a part of this show. Thank you for allowing me to create that ripple effect through you. You guys, you've been so amazing. Thank you so much for making this show one of the top financial podcasts in the country, possibly in the world. So thank you so much for doing so. Hey, if you're wondering what you could be doing right now, how much passive income you could create today, go to moneyripples.com. There's a passive income calculator. Fill it out completely, and you'll be able to find out just about how much passive income you could create in your life in the next 12 months. It's totally free. There's no risk. The only thing that hurts you is just not doing anything about it. So go check that out at moneyripples.com today. All right, so you're probably wondering, okay, how do I retire by 40? Maybe you're in your 30s at this point. Maybe you're about 40 already, but you're just wondering, is there hope, right? Because the problem I see all the time is that there are so many of us that are told we just got to scrimp and save for the next 30, 40 years. And then hopefully someday we'll have something, right? And we don't want that anymore. We don't want to have to just work our entire lives and die, and barely have that life to begin with, or even not even be able to have those precious years of our youth back again because we've spent them all working and slaving away. So then hopefully we might have a little bit of money later on. And even then, you're living on a fixed income budget. That's not what I wanted to see as financial freedom. I know you don't either. That's why you're here. Now, you might have heard of FIRE, the financially independent retire early, the FIRE movement. But the problem is this, that they're also overpromising a lot. And I'm going to kind of address that. And I'm not even going to show you how I was able to do it myself. How was I able to retire twice by the time I was 39 years old? I'm going to share that, but I'm going to compare it to an article that I found, which is interesting. This woman actually talked about how she's going to retire at 40, or at least she hopes to. So let's talk about that right now and see what is she doing and where are the gaps? Where could it actually be harmful if you follow her advice? Okay, so here it is, right? This is actually about the finance coach Bernadette Joy. I don't really know anything about Bernadette. I'll be honest. I think I've seen her picture somewhere before, but I've never really been a part of her podcast. I've never been a guest. I've never really watched it. I've never read her books, although it does promote her book that she's talking about here. But that being said, I kind of take this all with a grain of salt when I see this kind of stuff because, and maybe you do too. It's hard to find who are actually the legit people that do accomplish the things you're trying to accomplish versus those that are just trying to sell you something, right? And kind of given my background, in case this is the first time you see me, remember I started out as a financial advisor. I was a salesman in a suit. I was the one telling you to save and save and save forever. In fact, my initial goal back in the early 2000s was if I could scrimp and save enough for the next 20 years, by the time I got into my 40s, if I had $2 million, I can then live on the 3% a year, not the 4% rule. That was debunked a long time ago, but 3% a year, I could live on 60,000 a year or $5,000 a month. So I thought that's my goal. I just got to be cheap. I got to save everything I can, make a bigger income so then I can save more, but don't change my lifestyle. Just be cheap forever, right? And then in my 40s, I can be happy. Then I can be free. Here's what the shocker was, that when I started to realize that the advice I was giving really wasn't working for people, and I couldn't even find financial advisors that were financially free, even the ones that are good high income earners, even the ones that have been in business for 30 plus years, they couldn't do it either. And so I took the hint and I said, all right, I'm out. I found real estate investing. And of course, at that time, a lot of those guys were flippers, real estate flippers and buying and selling properties. I learned that I could actually lend my money to them and make an income off that. And I was able to retire when I was 28 years old. Crazy enough, I was able to retire on almost the same income as my goal was by age 40, but I was able to do it right then. And that's what I've been doing really ever since about middle to the end of 2006 till now, almost 20 years, teach people how to do this. And by the way, I lost all that money. When I say I retired twice by the time I was 39, it's because when the recession hit, a few years later, I lost everything, just about everything, almost everything. I didn't go bankrupt, but I sold off about everything I had. I foreclosed on my house. I mean, I was in dire straits. Literally, I was literally living on welfare with my wife wondering if she has to take her kids and move out to go live in her sister's basement because I couldn't get my crap together. Truth is, guys, yeah, I had real estate, didn't do great because I wasn't going for cash flow as much. I was going for making a lot of money on the growth of the appreciation. And then, two, I started a brand new business that were catering towards real estate flippers who were all going broke. And so our business was going broke because they couldn't pay us. I also wasn't getting paid on my real estate rentals. And so it was like this perfect storm. And I went over $1 million in debt. Fortunately, I was able to pull out of that eventually, was able to dig my way back out as I started to build my business again and start teaching not how to get out of the rat race, but how to get creative, how to find cash, even when you don't think you have it. And that kicked off a whole explosion in our old business that I had. I was with Freedom Fast Track back in those days, which is now Wealth Factory, and exploded our business. And then, of course, 2012 launched Money Ripples. Even went through divorce in 2015. By the end of 2016, had enough passive income to do it again. This time, much wiser and smarter than I was the first time around. So that's where I'm coming from. So that's the lens I have here. So I'm curious to see what Bernadette is recommending here. Now, here's her story. Now, I'll read this to you a little bit here for those of you that are listening to this. You can't see that I have this on the screen for the YouTube. By the way, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, Money Ripples with Chris Miles, be sure you are. So here's what it says. Later this month, personal finance author and entrepreneur Bernadette Joy will celebrate her 40th birthday in a unique way. She will retire, at least for a little while. Joy, who's 39, plans to practice retirement. I like how they put quotes, practice retirement, and has been working toward her savings goal for more than a decade. She is debt free and has a net worth of 1.9 million. So she's ready to see if her careful financial planning will allow her to retire. I'll just say this. The fact that she's debt free and has a net worth of 1.9 million is impressive. Now, this doesn't mean she's a good investor or saver necessarily, although I bet she is a good saver. But it doesn't mean that she's necessarily good at growing her wealth. Might just be that she made a lot of money in her profession, whatever that was. Again, I don't know all of her background, but if she's been selling people on financial stuff, she might have been making a lot of money, and that's what's helped build up her net worth. But again, 39 years old, 1.9 million net worth, debt free, very impressive. So I'm very proud of her. Now it says, so how did Joy get here at such a young age? Not by accident and not because of an inheritance, obviously. Her experience in paying down debt and planning for retirement led her to write Crush Your Money Goals. She also hosts a podcast of the same name. In fact, Joy has been planning for her retirement for several years. Quote, she says here, quote, my dad immigrated to the US, who worked his whole life and died during COVID-19, Joy says. He didn't work this hard for me to end up working just as hard as he did into my 70s. I get this because this is the thing that got me. The thing that really was the impetus, right? That catalyst. I mean, not impetus. The catalyst that got me out of being a financial advisor was when I sat down with my own father, who was 61 years old at the time, and after scrimping and saving, being debt free, like what Bernadette's talking about here, still I had to tell him. I said, Dad, you have just enough to live up for the next 5 or 6 years. That's all you've got, right? He had Y2K that beat up his retirement accounts, and he was trying to recover from that. And only just a few years later, guess what? The retirement accounts got hit again because of the Great Recession, right? And so he actually had to postpone retirement into his 70s, just like her father did. Although it sounded like her father may or may not have even made it really well into his 70s. But my dad had to do the same thing. He's still alive even to this day. So anyways, Joy is not sure she'll be retired forever, but she looks forward to seeing if it takes. I'm going to find out who I am outside of work, Joy said in an exclusive interview with TheStreet.com. At the top of her list for retirement hobbies, swimming lessons. Now that I thought was funny. She's like, what am I going to do in my retirement? I'm going to take swimming lessons. Why not now? What stop? I mean, are you really working that much? You can't even take a break for swimming lessons? I don't know. I thought that was funny. I expected something that was a little bit more time intensive. So now she gives some of her advice below. So number one, the advice she gives, pay off student debt as fast as possible. She says, debt is meant to be a short-term solution, not a long-term lifestyle, Joy says. I actually kind of agree with that statement. I like that. That's a good one. Of course, sometimes debt is a means to an end, such as student loan debt. In 2014, Joy took out 72,000 in loans to pay for an MBA. I'm just shocked that that was like barely 10 years ago. And in 2014, I had a bunch of kids already by this point. So she took out 72,000 loans to pay for her MBA. At the time, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into until I realized that I alone was responsible for paying it all off, she says. I get that. Debt can be crushing. She says the debt was distressing, but once Joy used the student loan calculator and realized that she was accruing $7.92 a day in interest, she was motivated to erase it ASAP. Okay, so I find this interesting. $7.92. So I'm going to do the math here times 365 days. So she's paying about just shy of $2,900 a year. Now that might sound like a lot, and I'm not saying it's small change. Obviously, I mean, 2,800 a year. That's just over $200 a month. She's paying in interest on the student loan. So she was trying to rid of it because she didn't like paying that in interest. But let's take the bigger context here. She got $72,000 in student loans to get her MBA. Think about this from a standpoint here. First and foremost, if you're getting an MBA, I would imagine you're doing it because you want a better paying career, right? Well, what would that MBA pay you? Now, if that MBA doesn't pay you an extra, $72,000 over your career, yeah, it's probably not worth it. Or even if you throw in interest with it too, maybe you throw in the interest, maybe it's $100,000 with interest. Okay, well, let's go with that. If it doesn't make you more money, why would you get the MBA in the first place? Why would you spend all that extra money? I have no problem against student loans, by the way. I just have a problem that I don't like to put my money, whether I use student loans or my own cash, into anything that won't make me more money. So let's just assume it makes her an extra 50,000 a year. Well, great. Well, then that's a good investment, isn't it? If I can make 50,000 a year, do you think I give a crap about the extra $200 a month I'll pay in interest? Yeah, I'll pay that 72,000 back, but even if it takes me several years and it costs me 100 grand, which by the way, that's probably not too far off the truth if she pays that in less than 10 years or about 10 years. Well, guess what? Like that means 10 years, if I pay 10,000 a year out of that 50,000 I made, that was well worth it. And I still have a better lifestyle. But I get it. She was trying to erase all that debt. But just so you know, like when people say I'm going to lose $7.92 a day in interest. Okay, I get that. That's part of the equation. But what's the other half of the equation? What is the income you earn? If it's more than $7.92 a day, it's worth it. If you don't get the freaking MBA. Okay, that's just my opinion. All right, moving on down. So she resolved to pay them off in 2 years instead of 10. And 22 months later, I made my final payment, she says. Good. Yay. It sounds like maybe she did make more money. That's good. Perfect. She just saved herself maybe $10,000, $20,000 of interest. But just so you know, $2,800 of interest a year on 72,000 isn't that bad. That actually means that she's probably paying like 5% in interest. Not a bad deal. Okay. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. The next thing she says is prioritize Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs. Joy says people often ask her if they should pay off debt or invest. I'm a broken record, but I will always stand by paying off debt first, she says. Okay. And that could be good. I wouldn't say always. Again, never mix strategies with principles. Always versus never. I don't think that's always the case. Sometimes debt, like student loan debt, if I know if like her debt was 5% a year, and she's probably writing off the interest on her taxes, by the way. But if I knew that I was going to make at least 5% a year on my investments, then yeah, I would do it. Now, most Americans don't know how to do that because they just know throw their money in the market, which could also lose money. So yes, they would be better off, especially for the here and now, probably to pay off debt. If it's a student loan, though, you don't save any money on the monthly payment until you pay it all off, well, then build the savings to then eventually pay it off. That's my recommendation. All right, but back to Bernadette Joy here, right? She says, once you're ready to start your retirement savings, make sure you're setting up tax advantage accounts, including 401ks, 401bs, that should be say 403b, or IRAs. You don't need any other investment accounts until you have absolutely exhausted the limits of these accounts. So she's saying, first and foremost, start your 401k, right? Don't do anything else until you do that. Okay, debatable. She says there's two types of IRAs. Joy thinks everyone needs to know about are Roth and traditional. There's one key difference between them, she explains, when you get the tax benefit. This is an interesting point. With a traditional IRA, you save on taxes today, while a Roth save you taxes during retirement. If your annual income is $70,000, you contribute $10,000 to a traditional IRA, your taxable income this year will be $60,000. Get it, right? So you basically $10,000 you contribute to the Roth to the IRA, traditional IRA, now brings your income down to $60,000. So you don't pay tax on the extra $10,000. It's not taxed today. But here's the thing: that initial $10,000 is taxed as of the earnings you made over the years. So here's the thing: you're not taxed until you take the funds out of retirement. This means you have zero tax advantage on 401ks and IRAs and 403bs. So when she's saying you get a tax advantage, there is none. There is no tax advantage. Yeah, you save on taxes today, but do you trust that your taxes are higher now than they will be down the road? That's debatable. Now, she says this: with a Roth, you're putting away post tax dollars. What makes a Roth special is you don't pay taxes on the earnings. The income earned on the tax and the account is tax free, says Joy. So, if you contribute $10,000 to a traditional retirement account and that money grows to, say, $30,000 by the time you retire, you will pay taxes on the entire $30,000. But if you put that same $10,000 into a Roth and it grows to $30,000, you will not pay tax on anything in the account. So, just giving you the basic stuff here, right? So, once again, here's what I find fascinating, right? So, she's giving you the basic stuff, and it's all good basic information in the sense that, yes, when do you get taxed? Like I said, do you really get to any tax advantages by contributing to an IRA or a 401k now? No. You still pay taxes later. Now, someone could argue, well, Chris, with a Roth, you pay with after tax dollars. You do, but all those gains, all that growth is tax free. If I were to pick any of these two, I would pick the Roth. The only problem is the Roth only lets you save up to about $7,000 a year. And here's the biggest thing I have, the biggest problem I have with her advice right now. This is why I think she's temporarily planning for retirement. You'll see here, there are some things that bail her out a little bit here for retirement. But here's the problem: her goal is retire at 40. When's the retirement age for traditional IRAs, 401ks, and Roths? Right now, 59 and a half, right? So she's 20 years off of that goal. So you pack all this money into there, and what does she do when she gets in retirement? She can't use them. I mean, she could, but she's going to get slapped with 10% penalties for touching her money too early. And if it's a traditional IRA or 401k, because she's been telling you to max it out, guess what? Now you have a 10% penalty plus income taxes because you didn't defer those taxes. Well, you basically just deferred your taxes till later. So now you're getting slapped with, potentially, depending on how much income you're pulling out, unless you just made no money in the market and you're living like a pauper, right? You're living like you're homeless. Then yeah, you might not have more than 25, 30% being taxed. But with that 10% penalty, and say that you're in the 22% tax bracket, that means a third of your money is going to taxes and penalties. Does that sound like a great retirement plan for you? Does that sound like good advice? Not if you're trying to retire early. The vehicle doesn't match the destination. If your destination is 40, don't put your money in accounts that doesn't let you access till you're 59 and a half without slapping your hand with penalties and taxes. Get it? It's common sense. But again, she's not even talking about that here. Now, this one's interesting too. It says avoid the 30-year interest trap. You can imagine what this is talking about, the 30-year mortgage. That's right. So it says in her young life, Joy has already owned 3 homes. Now, again, impressive. But notice she invested in real estate, some of it including her own house. Each time she opted for a 10 or 15-year mortgage instead of the typical 30-year mortgage. Why? Because generally speaking, you can get a slightly lower rate on a shorter mortgage. This is true. This is very true. The lower interest rates and the shorter repayment periods have saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest and allowed me to pay off the homes even faster than the mortgage durations, Joy says. She shares the math for a home that costs $363,000. If you were to buy such a home today with a 20% down payment, you'd finance $290,000. On a 30-year mortgage with 8% rate, the monthly payment would be $2,131, and the total interest paid over 30 years is $476,706. So, summing this up, this $290,000 mortgage that you have, right? Which, by the way, that's a very low mortgage. Getting a home at 363, depending on the part of the country you're in, may or may not be very possible. But anyways, regardless of that, it's the principle that matters here. On a 30-year mortgage with an 8% interest rate, the monthly payment would be $2,131, and the total interest paid is $476,706. So right there, if it's an 8% mortgage, which by the way, the rates are not that high for 30-year mortgage, but I'm going with it, right? That is a significant amount of interest. Here's the thing that she teaches that I think is fascinating. It's like, but if you put the same down payment on a 15-year mortgage with the same interest rate, so same 8%, much higher than the 15-year mortgage rate now, the total interest would be 209,000 with a monthly payment of 2775. That's a difference of 644 a month, but it would save 267,000 and 15 years of payments. Joy says that's enough money to buy another home. So she says homeownership is a symbol of American dream. Joy notes, but many people find it to be more trouble than it's worth. For that reason, Joy and her husband are renters for the time being. We sold our third paid off home in 2022. It means we can live on our own terms rather than our home loan terms. So, okay, let's get to this. I'm going to share a different part of my screen here. Okay, so I'm bringing up here the mortgage calculator here that, I just went to calculator.net, something very simple. You guys have been watching the show long enough. You know I use this quite a bit. So see here on the mortgage calculator, I put in the same $363,000 home, 20% down payment, 30-year term at 8%. You'll see same loan amount here, 20,000 or 290,400. And you'll see right there, just like she said, 476,706 in total interest paid. That's true. Now she says, but notice if we make this 15 years at the same 8%, guess what? Boom, 27, 75, 21. Now, yes, 209,000. That's great. So we see the difference here of roughly about $260,000. But remember this saved about 664 bucks a month, give or take, right? You do that if you pull that out over the next 15 years, you get about $116,000. So yes, some of that savings is of course the fact that you are paying less over time. Now, understand that it's the same interest rate. This is something I've taught a lot of my clients. This is very important to understand. I've taught a lot of my clients this because I said, well, listen, the same interest rate here, it doesn't change. Even if you had a 30-year mortgage, and just like I said here, you had a 30-year mortgage where the payment's 2130.85, and you decided you were going to pay the extra $664 a month of extra principal on top of that mortgage, guess when you pay it off? Exactly 15 years. The only difference between her strategy and what I'm talking about is, and she's doing the whole Dave Ramsey thing. Understand that she's a very just Dave Ramsey to a T, except she's renting right now, which Dave Ramsey may or may not be a fan of. He might want to say have home ownership, don't rent. I actually am totally okay with her renting. I think renting can make sense in several cases. Owning a home can make sense in other cases too. So what she did, and just so you know, she kept selling her properties really over the last 10 years or so. What's happened with the real estate market over the last 10 years? Kept going up, didn't it? It kept going up, 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 and away. So she made a lot of her money and net worth by doing that. And then she sold it off again. So she got all these proceeds. This is the end of the article, by the way. When we saw the end of it, we don't know how much cash flow she really has. We don't know where the money's coming from in this quasi retirement that she's trying out, the practice retirement, as she calls it, right? We don't know if she's just trying to live on the cash that's there. And then maybe down the road, she's like, okay, well, now I need to work again and go work. Okay, cool. Well, tell us that then. Instead of just saying, yeah, I'm going to try it out, see if I enjoy my life. I get that too. I try to retire and I can't do it. I literally can't do it because if I try to stop working, I get depressed. I have to do something. This is why I even kept this podcast going for the last 11 years, even though I didn't need it. I didn't even need my business, but I kept going because I love teaching. I love this regardless. But I also know that if I'm going to help you, of course, we can't just teach on a podcast and then say, good luck, have fun out there. You're probably gonna lose a lot of money doing it yourself, but good luck with you. Enjoy your time. So that's why we kind of did what we did. But to see this happen, it's like, okay, you can just pay an extra payment. You're not required to make that payment because here's what's happened. Life gets in the way. I'm glad the last 10 years, nothing bad ever happened to her. But how many times have you heard of people, maybe this has been you, where you get laid off? What about during 2020? And did you have to get furloughed? Did your company shut down for a time? Were you a business owner and you had to shut your business down for 2 months? Was that a little bit stressful? What do you do when you don't have income coming in? That's something that obviously she's young. She's had very little experience doing this kind of thing. So of course, it's fine for her to do what she's done, but everything worked out perfectly. Life isn't always perfect. Things can happen. Hiccups can happen. I would know. I've had plenty of those hiccups and still was able to come back out on top. However, what happens is so many times people just put these numbers in calculators like this should work out. Well, that's awesome. But when you're forced to make that 27.75 a month payment, and then all of a sudden you lose a job, you start hating that $2,700 a month payment, don't you? Think of this in this situation. If you were to lose your job, would you rather be paying 27.75 a month or 21.30 a month, like you show here? It's so much better to have the choice to add extra onto your mortgage than to actually be forced to pay the extra payment on your mortgage. This is what trips people up. I've actually had clients that got denied on 10-year loans, like she was recommending, because why? Because it was too high of a payment compared to their income. The bank said, no, that's an unwise decision based on your income. Even though they were really good savers, they were lived very cheap lifestyles, the banks wouldn't go for it because they looked at that as a sign of bad financial health. Don't trust people when they tell you to do this because that's what the calculator shows. And by what, like I said, yeah, you paid really $116,000 more in payments during those 15 years. Yes, it saved you about $260,000. That's good. Okay. It saved you some interest. But you know what? You'd be better off putting that money into savings, or even better yet, put the money into something that does generate some passive income cash flow to then offset your mortgage payment. And maybe you could pay down your mortgage faster. Again, I don't like to put extra money on my mortgage because I did that in 2007 and 8 and well, 6 through 2009 really. I was doing that well till 2008 and I had to stop making payments. When I did that, of course, I had all this equity trapped in my property. When I wanted to get the money back out, the bank said no. Then I tried to sell the property, but because the bank said, well, now that the rates, the values have gone down, you can't just sell this normal because now all your equities disappeared because you've been trying to make the payments for so long and now you've watched the values drop. So now you have to do a short sale. But guess what? They were owned by Lehman Brothers, and Lehman Brothers said we don't allow the short sale, and they eventually pushed me and forced me into foreclosure even though we had a buyer for a house. We could not sell it because the bank said no. So for me, what I've learned from my experience and from those hard times is be liquid in cash. Have that cash outside of it. Don't throw it all in your house, right? That's a dangerous thing. So just be aware. And just so you know, here's a more real life type of scenario. Let's just say it's 7% for 30-year mortgage. Let's go with that, right? 1932 a month. Now, a 15-year mortgage will be at least half that. By the way, literally, you can see latest mortgage rates. They throw quotes down here. Look, they put quote as 15-year mortgage at 6.25%. Let's go with it, right? 15-year mortgage, 6.25%. Now, let's see the total interest is 405,000. I do this, now it's 157,000. Cool, I saved $250,000. Yes, but if you go back, of course, what was my payment? 1932. Now I'm paying about $550 more a month, right? That's a little over $6,600 a year that I'm paying extra over those next 15 years. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing this, but don't be so aggressive. And again, you don't make any interest on the equity of your home. You can make so much more money than that because that extra 250,000, I can use that extra $660 a month or whatever it is, like I can use that money to go and invest and do other things. So that's the only issue I have. Now, again, everybody's different. That's why I'm not saying that's just one or the other, but just be aware that although she was doing this to get a paid off house, she sold them anyways. So all this extra money she was sinking in to try to save on interest, guess what? She ended up selling the properties anyways. So did you really save on interest? Not really, because you didn't have that much time. She wasn't doing it over 15 years. No, she says she paid them all off in less than the 10 or 15-year period. So she was aggressively just packing money away into these houses, but there was no need for it, especially if she's just going to turn around and sell it. That's what people don't understand. Is like all this extra cash they're throwing in is just extra cash throwing in. And again, your house does not appreciate more by having a paid off house. It appreciates whether you do it or not. She had appreciation and she was just trying to race against the interest, which again, that interest rate, if you understand simple versus compounding interest, if it is, say, 7%, like I was showing you before, you only need to earn about a 3.3% return compounded on that same money. If you have the money to pay off your house, but then you don't, that compounding interest only needs to be about 3.3% to beat the 7%. That's it. Again, that's a whole nother discussion about compound versus simple interest. I've had other videos we talked about, but you get my point here, right? Is that this is just what she's trying to do here. It sounds great, but the execution, what does it do for her at the end of the day? Guess what she's doing now? She's still renting. What does that equal? A payment. she still has a payment. And all these people that try to get debt free, quote unquote, trying to pay off their house, and they realize their house is not an asset because you still have to pay taxes, you still have to pay insurance, you still have to pay for maintenance and upkeep and everything else. House is never free. It never is. It's always in constant state of decay. If you rent, cool. Now you don't have as much to do with the repairs and the maintenance issues as much. But guess what? You also don't have any equity. You don't have any real gain there. So there's always the pros and cons you got have going with this. And it comes down to this point here is that she's saying pack your money away into these retirement accounts. But if you want to try to do it by 40, it doesn't work. This is why we talk about max ROI infinite banking. That strategy actually works. That's why we talk about not packing away and locking in prison your 401ks and IRAs, but instead taking that money, using it to generate passive income now. This is just like one of my clients who actually was doing the same thing she does. And again, he came from Asian descent, and Asians are like the best savers ever. Like of all my clients, I've never seen anyone do it better than a lot of my Asian clients. And so they pack a lot of money away. Sometimes half of their income they're packing away. He was no exception to the rule. He was packing money away into his IRAs and 401ks. He was also packing money away to pay down his mortgages aggressively. He actually even tried to do a 10-year mortgage. By the way, they rejected him for a 10-year mortgage at one point because, again, the payment was too high. So they put him back to a 15-year mortgage instead. So he was trying to aggressively pay it down so he could still pay it off in 10 years, which, by the way, like I said, you still have to do. You're just not forced into the payment. You still can do it. It doesn't matter as much. So anyways, he was doing that. And I said, well, 6 years, you could pay these two mortgages off. You'll free up $4,200 a month. But then what? That's it. And remember, he was in his early 40s. I said, but if you sell this investment property, and I even told him to cash out refi on his house back when the rates were really low. He didn't do it, but he did sell off that mortgage, that other investment property that had 700,000 of equity, sold it off, bought more properties outside of the state of California because that's where he was living. And with those properties, it started generating about $70,000 a year. Now, flash forward about 4 years later, he is now bumped up to about 8,000 a year, or sorry, it bumped up to about 8,000 a month or over 100,000 a year that he's now earning on these properties because he kept taking the cash flow and reinvesting. He has far exceeded, he's doubled the cash flow he was hoping to earn in 2026 by paying off his mortgages. Do you get that point there? Is that there's different races going on. And yeah, you could try to go and just pay off your mortgages, and that's okay. I personally think if you're going to pay off a mortgage, do it when you've got so much money coming in, you don't even know what to do with it. Then it might make sense to pay off your mortgage. If you don't know what to do with that money, again, it comes back to stewardship. Always your stewardship. What is it that my money can do? What's the highest and best use of my money right now? How can I use it to be able to create more cash flow, more income? What can I do to create greater protection of me and my family? That's the kind of thing that a steward starts asking. And that's where you start to see there's so many more options than just stuffing your IRAs and your 401ks and your Roth IRAs. And then you max them out. And then you're trying to pay off your house and everything else, just like Dave Ramsey teaches, just like Bernadette Joy has been teaching here. And yet the execution is not solidified enough. Even I would say in her situation, she will probably get to a point where she'll say, well, most of my money is locked up till I'm 59 and a half. So I'm using up the money I got from the proceeds of my real estate that I bought. I'm using up those proceeds, but what happens when that money starts draining out? She'll probably come back in a few years or so, say, well, that was fun, but retirement's not for me. No, I'm just going to go back and work again. Maybe I'll write another book about my retirement, even though I really can't do it. That is the thing that ticks me off. This is why I have to keep doing this podcast, because I'm getting so sick and tired of the BS that's out there. The execution, I know, I've seen this firsthand with so many clients, hundreds and hundreds of clients that we've worked with. Too many have been on the same path as Bernadette Joy. And yet they realize when it comes down to the real execution, the real life reality that they're dealing with, which is, hey, well, I don't have the income coming in. I've got money stored up. Sure, I've got this net worth, but so what? If that net worth doesn't pay me income, it's not worth anything. That is the difference. That's why you got to reject this accumulation mentality that she and the Dave Ramsey of the world all teach. And even Ramit Sethi and all these guys teach the same kind of crap, and start focusing on this income, this acceleration mindset. Reject the accumulation, accept the acceleration. That is where the real power is. And that's where financial freedom is possible. And that is how you can actually retire before you're 40, legitimately, even better off than Bernadette Joy. And you don't have to write a book about it to finally make it work for you. You don't have to do that because you can actually make it a reality. Why? Because we've had clients do it. And I've done it too. It's actually legit. So again, I love this article. I think that she's done some amazing things. but she could do so much better if she rejected that old accumulation mentality that really only serves the banks and the financial institutions, but doesn't serve her and her family in real life. That's the choice you get to make for yourself. Do you want to become another pawn in this game? Do you want to be somebody else who ends up being victimized? Do you want to be somebody else and really a prisoner of your own making? You get to choose. You get to choose what path you take. You either take the path that everybody talks about that doesn't really work, or you can take the path that we've been talking about that's been proven to work time and time again and can actually buy you the time freedom and the money freedom that you so desire. Again, if you ever have questions, you always reach out to us, moneyripples.com. But be careful about the advice you see out there. It looks great, it looks flashy, but at the end of the day, let's be honest, my book that's coming out soon, Upside Down Millionaire, it's going to be a much better book than the one she's writing. Great stuff. I'm sure she's a great woman, but the stuff that we teach has been proven to work time and time again. Be careful who you follow. Be sure to follow those that have been there, they've done that, and they're still doing it today. That's my challenge to you.